Hi everyone, welcome back to Into Deep, a podcast with me, Alyssa. In this podcast, we go a little too deep into everything feminism, from why are women much more common in the retail sector to why is the sexual assault rate in the retail sector so high. Yeah, I think this is a bit of a random episode actually, but I think it should be interesting. Obviously I put up a really long episode last week, so I haven't really had that much time to think of a whole new episode, but I think it'll still be good anyway. This episode is mainly focused on, I guess, like the, maybe not abuse, but like the experience that young workers have working in customer service, particularly like fast food, retail, restaurants, hospitality, much of which is not really worth the amount of money they're paid. Not only just young workers, but women as well, who are much more likely in the retail sector. In saying that, like, I had a working title for this episode, and it was just like, working in retail as a woman, aka hell. I've been in the same retail job for 4.5 years, and I actually love it, so maybe doesn't really apply to me. Can I just say before we start this episode, you're definitely going to hear a fan sound in the background. I literally say this at the start of every episode, but it's March. It's autumn in Australia. Why is it still 40 degrees Celsius today? 40 degrees in March. Are you crazy? I actually feel like I'm dying. Like I can't deal with this weather anymore. When I started this podcast in January, it made sense for it to be hot every day. Doesn't make sense anymore. Also, why this episode is probably quite short is because I've been so stressed this week. I mean, I'm not going to go through the full story, but I was meant to be doing a master's degree starting in the second semester this year. However, I may not be getting into it. And the uni is taking so long to get back to me. So I've been so stressed, so insanely stressed this week. So I haven't really had time to organize a really long episode. So this is just going to be, again, kind of like a filler episode. I do have a really good one planned for next week as well. But again, just a quick filler episode, probably a little bit more chatty as well, not super research based. But again, I put out such a long episode last week, so I feel like it's okay. I feel like I've had pretty good experiences with working. I've literally only had 2 jobs, and actually the first one was really bad, but the reason I've been in this one for so long is because it's a good job. So maybe I don't relate to a lot of this, but just because I haven't experienced it myself, really, I feel like every single other person I know who worked one of these jobs as a teenager just had the worst experience ever. But also in saying that, I did start the job that I'm at after I turned 18. So I feel like it's so much different. And in terms of retail, it's just kind of crazy to me that sometimes all of the employees are 14 years old. Actually, what inspired this episode though, in saying that I don't experience anything bad, I mean, it's generally true, but I think it's somewhat impossible to have no bad experiences working in retail, because I think everyone has at least one, probably usually one, more than one bad experience when you're working a minimum wage customer service job. So what inspired this? Maybe 2 weeks ago, I mean, I was already thinking about doing an episode on this already, but maybe 2 weeks ago, this guy came into my job. He asked me for something and I didn't know what he said. So I was like, can you repeat that? What did you say? And then he screamed at me that I knew nothing, and he called me a stupid bitch, which I kind of laughed at because I was like, what is happening? What? Was that a necessary reaction to what just happened? I do think he had some kind of mental condition, but honestly, I don't even agree with that really being an excuse for a lot of these things. For example, do you know when there's cases of autistic boys who will sexually assault or rape a girl at a university, and will be like, oh, it's autistic, he's autistic, he couldn't control it, that's just how he is. I don't agree with that at all. It's not any woman's fault that you're autistic. And the only reason that he thinks that was an okay thing to do is, again, because of the society that he's grown up in, where women or violence against women is never taken seriously. So it actually doesn't matter that he's autistic, he still shouldn't be doing that, right? Anyway, this guy that came to my store, normally if someone does that, like saying normally if someone does that, it hasn't happened to me that often. But if someone were to like scream and yell at me, I would kick them out immediately. However, he just like kept walking into the store. So I kind of couldn't do anything. Obviously everyone in the shop heard him just call me a stupid bitch. So my colleague comes over and she was like, "What happened?" I was like, I genuinely have no idea because I didn't do anything. Actually did nothing to elicit that reaction. And I honestly don't even think there is anything that I could have done to elicit that reaction. Anyway, he then comes to leave the store, calls me a stupid bitch, a cow again, also tells me to get a real job. Like, tells me to get a real job while you are in a store screaming at a minimum wage employee. Who's the jobless one? And then he also threatened to smack my colleague. So that was a really fun experience. Honestly, again, like I didn't really feel like I was in danger at any point. So it wasn't really that bad, but also that probably shouldn't be happening to you while you're at work. Of course, like all jobs will carry some kind of risk. Like I'm not like, wow, bad things can happen in this job. That means it's a horrific job to have. I think what's unique about the retail industry and also like fast food and restaurants and things, however, I don't have experience in either of those. So what's unique about that is that I think around 40% of retail employees are like young people 21 and under. And retail can and very, very often takes advantage of young workers who, again, aren't even on a full wage, yet typically do the same work as their colleagues or other people who are on a full wage. And this isn't necessarily a gendered issue when you're talking about young people. Definitely customers will be rude to anyone regardless of gender, but in terms of like sexual assault, that is obviously very heavily weighted towards women at work, and particularly when we're talking about those under 21 who are very often being sexually assaulted while they're at work or just harassed in general. There's just so many like middle-aged men who will predate on young girls at retail jobs. Like, it's so common. In terms of like generic risks of working in retail, according to the Australian Retailers Association, this article was titled Burnout in the Australian Retail Industry, kind of addressing both the physical and psychosocial risks of working in retail. Again, it's like not like that hard of a job. It's not like physical labor. But I guess what's specific about this sector is that it's like has such a big part that is like young workers, and that's why I think it's more important to address problems with it, because oftentimes they don't really know if something is being done to them that's not legal, or they also like don't really know what to do if they're in a situation where like a customer is screaming at them, obviously, because you shouldn't need to know what to do in that situation as a child. Retail work can be like physically demanding as well. I mean, again, I haven't experienced that, but obviously like standing for like 12 hours straight isn't really the best experience, and that's illegal. But there's so many people who are, especially young people who work in jobs who just like don't listen to legal requirements for breaks or like toilet breaks or anything like that, and they're literally just forced to stand around for like 10 hours plus. And why is that? Again, because they're young workers and it's so easy to take advantage of them. According to Safe Work Australia, musculoskeletal disorders are among the leading causes of workplace injuries in the retail sector. Also, like when I first started working my job, I think I'm better now because I've like worked there for so long, but I had like the most severe back pain ever, which I think is my fault because I had no stomach muscles because I never exercised. So I literally did not have the like, I didn't have the ability to even like hold myself up straight, which is so bad. Like, honestly, it's probably good that I've worked this job for so long, because the fact that I like couldn't even stand straight for a few hours without like back pain. Also, I feel like so many people get like foot pain as well, and then that causes so many other issues as well throughout your body. I feel like when it comes to physical risks as well, it's kind of difficult to maintain them because like there's just nothing you can really do to like not force people to stand around all day. I mean, I feel like people should be allowed to sit though. When I think about it, I'm like, that's kind of crazy that like usually when you work a retail job, you're not allowed to sit down. What's up with that? Small businesses as well can like lack the resources to implement more ergonomic spaces as well. And then bigger businesses having to like implement them across many locations can be difficult as well. But obviously, burnout doesn't just come from physical problems. Psychosocial risks are so high in this job, I swear. I don't know if you've seen that tweet. It was a while ago. But it was like, working in retail is psychological horror, and working in hospitality is jump scare horror. Now that I say that, it might have been the other way around. But yeah, it can be. Sometimes it is like very scary. The Australian Retailers Association says that psychosocial risks from working in retail can include job insecurity, customer aggression and violence, workplace bullying, poor management practices, and excessive demands, significantly impacting mental health in the retail sector. Obviously, like these are, I'd say, even like worse risks when it comes to working in this sector, like the psychosocial psychosocial risks sounds crazy also, but it is honestly just the fact that you have to interact with customers, because people can be so evil. I feel like people who haven't worked in customer service, like, I think it needs to be like a legal requirement for everyone to work in the customer service industry for like a year, because that would severely reduce the amount of people who are crazy as customers. Like, they never understand. They always want to quote like the consumer affairs, whatever, and be like, you need to give me a refund. But like, they don't even know the laws because they've never worked in the industry, or they've never even Googled it. They just like make it up. They're like, no, it's illegal for you to not give me a refund. I'm like, please show me the proof of that, because you won't be able to find it. Trust me. But I guess what recently is the main focus when it comes to working in these industries is the increase in violence, particularly after the pandemic. This increase like hasn't slowed down, even though the pandemic was 5 years ago. BBC News had an article in 2023 about how UK shop workers have become targets for abuse and attacks. In the UK, violence and abuse against shop workers rose to 1,300 incidents a day in 2023, and this was up 50% from 2022. So it's not even like it's slowly getting better after COVID, like it's just continually getting worse. Obviously, there's so many factors which influence this as well. I mean, when it comes to like shoplifting, that's probably because of the cost of living and just a million different factors which are impacting people globally right now. The British Retail Consortium criticised the woefully inadequate action taken by the government to address this crisis. The BRC said incidents against retail staff ranged from racial abuse and sexual harassment to physical assault and threats with weapons. It said about 8,800 of the total incidents across the year resulted in injury. I think in the UK it would be so much worse than in Australia. I'm actually unsure about the US, but I feel like when it comes to like shop employees in the UK, especially in London, I'm really not surprised by that statistic, especially with racial abuse there right now and the amount of people who are like against immigrants in the UK. That really does not surprise me at all. In Australia, there was a report by the National Retail Association titled "Abuses Forcing Workers Out of Retail." This surveyed 4,000 Australian retail workers to gauge public support for initiatives to improve the health and well-being of retail workers. More than 88% of retail union members had experienced verbal abuse from a customer. Additionally, 15% experienced physical customer violence, and 11% experienced sexual harassment or abuse, with 36% of those incidents being perpetrated by customers. I feel like that's a huge thing to note in this industry as well, because there's so many young people and because there's so many women. It's not even just the customers that are the problem, it's the management that feels like they can take advantage of women, particularly younger women. And because, again, it's in the workplace, it's difficult to like be able to speak out against it. For a lot of different reasons, which we're going to get into. Though all retail workers can be affected by workplace harassment or abuse, of course, as I've said, it is women and younger workers who are most at risk. Considering the relatively high rates of younger and female employment in the retail sector, the predisposition to being at a higher risk if you're a woman or a young person, when this makes up most of the industry, is like so much more concerning. In a 2024 survey, by Motorola Solutions titled The State of Retail Worker Safety in Australia and New Zealand, they acknowledged that while the global pandemic, which contributed to a spike in retail worker abuse and workers quitting their jobs, is over, retail workers in Australia and New Zealand remain genuinely concerned about their safety and security. Around a third of retail workers surveyed said they considered leaving their jobs because of safety concerns. Also, I think even where I work in my job, I've noticed it getting worse and worse over time. When I first worked there, I feel like it was much safer, and it just continuously gets worse. I started working there at the end of 2020 when in WA we hadn't, actually that's so funny to think about. In WA we didn't have a pandemic yet in 2020. I think it took around the first 6 months of 2021 until we were in lockdown or anything. I actually don't remember, but yeah, it felt a lot safer back then, I think. And it's just kind of continuously getting worse for employees. There's not really any kind of measures in place to stop it as well, even though it's something that most people are aware of. More than half of respondents, at 57%, said that public safety personnel like police, ambulance, or fire officials are called to their stores every other month or between 2 to 4 times per year. I've only had to call the police once, and security, I think, once or maybe twice. But even in saying that, that's kind of crazy. I had to call the police once because of shoplifting, which is probably the least concerned thing in terms of violence. But even in saying that, that's kind of crazy that I've had to contact someone because I fear for my safety. Feelings of safety and security extend beyond what's happening in the store as well. When we talk about retail and fast food, it's very often that either they're in shopping centers, or especially with fast food, they're kind of in areas which aren't super populated. And if you're finishing work late at night, 10 p.m. or later, even being in the car park is going to be something that influences your safety as well. Respondents highlighted their concern for their safety when arriving or leaving work outside of daylight hours and in the car park. Again, I haven't really ever felt super unsafe getting to or leaving work, but particularly during holiday hours as well, which I think is the most unsafe time for retail employees, definitely. A lot of the times if I'm starting in the middle of the day or something, there's not going to be any parking. And for some employees as well, even if this isn't the case, sometimes their staff parking area is so far away from the normal car park, and walking there outside of daylight hours is also really scary and unsafe. And that also goes into the safety level of their job as well. Earlier this year, Woolworths New Zealand announced it was deploying team safety cameras across all 191 of its stores nationally in response to a 75% increase in physical assaults and 148% increase in serious reportable events in the last 3 years. I think that means they were intending to employ body cameras in all of their stores. When it comes to things like that, and especially in Woolworths and Coles in Australia right now, and the amount of anti-shoplifting things that they're bringing in, is it really for the safety of their employees, or is it so they're more likely to catch people who are shoplifting? And especially when you talk about places like Woolworths and Coles, first of all, the price gouging, I think shoplifting from there kind of makes sense. But also it's food. Some people literally can't afford that. And employing all of these safety sort of things, is it really for the safety of your employees, or is it just so you have more proof to be able to catch people who have shoplifted? Typically people who are not as well off socioeconomically and can't afford food. I'd like to know the real reasons of why they're employing body cameras in all of their stores. As I've said, taking advantage of teenage workers is, I guess, one of the biggest issues that I would highlight with this industry. When I was in school and all of my friends were getting their first jobs, the amount of times I had to tell them that something that was happening at their work was not legal, so many times, whether it was they weren't being given breaks, even though it's illegal to not receive a break if you've worked over 5 hours. A lot of them weren't getting breaks, or so many of them were getting paid below minimum wage, or a lot of them would get calls during school time from managers asking them if they could come to work. Literal managers for who fucking knows, City Beach, Macca's, being can you skip from school and then come work? I swear I knew so many people that happened to. Imagine getting a call from your minimum wage job that you work like 2 shifts a week and they're asking you to leave school early to come work for them. No. And saying no to these things as well would get them met with like less shift allocations or just being like iced out by the managers. I think in WA, the youngest you can work is 13, which actually thinking about that is so crazy. I've done like a lot of tutoring before, and I worked with like a few kids in year 6 who would be like 11. That's literally a child. Like, that's literally a child. Why does a 13-year-old have a job, have a customer service job at that? Like, in an industry where it's so easy to get them taken advantage of and where customers are genuinely evil. As I said, approximately 40% of the workforce are young workers, 21 and under. Safe Work in New South Wales identified 6 highest risk factors for young workers specifically. Those included inadequate supervision and training, limited understanding of work health and safety rights and worker obligations, inexperience in the job industry or just at that specific job, high incidence of mental health issues, being bullied or facing peer pressure, and a reluctance to speak up. Because of a lot of potential reasons as well, not only are young workers likely to have negative experiences with customers, sometimes the workplace also doesn't take their duty of care seriously enough. That's why there's so many teenage girls that get like taken advantage of at work by older men. I feel like that is so common. I don't know if you guys have seen that meme recently of like older men who will Snapchat their like young female employees or colleagues out of work hours and just be so fucking weird about it. Actually, one of my co-workers right now was talking about how like this old guy at her work used to message her outside of work all the time, but then would never talk to her at work. Like, just so many freakish old guys who work in the retail industry, and then they're just like, ooh, and my colleague's a 15-year-old girl, I should ask her out. Don't do that, please. Actually, there was an article published in ABC News titled, "As a naive teenager, I learned the perks and pitfalls of paid work. I lost count of the amount of times I was taken advantage of." When this author turned 15, she like begged her local bowling alley to hire her as a casual milkshake maker. The guy who owned the place was really creepy, and as soon as she started, all of the girls who worked there told her never go out back with the manager under any circumstances, no matter what he says. Yeah. That sounds like a classic retail manager to me. It didn't take long before he made the suggestion. He offered to teach her how to make hamburgers, which was not a part of her job. While they were out the back in the kitchen, he slipped his arms around her and asked her for a kiss. While she managed to push him off and say no, she never told her parents and kept it as a secret, because I guess not only because of the shame that can come with that, but also because like you don't want to speak up about it in fear of like losing your job or getting less shifts or any of these other like potential outcomes that could come with speaking up against management or anyone higher up in your job. The author says she lost count of the amount of time she was taken advantage of. She got a job at Woolworths later, and while it was typically much better to work in a company which was larger with a lot of locations, I guess because it's more difficult for them to get away with like not paying you enough, not letting you have breaks, or having like weird people working there. But when she was at Woolworths, her pay was also illegally docked. So sexual harassment is so common in this industry. And as I said, especially because there's so many young teenage girls working there. The University of Sydney did an article titled "Sexual Harassment is Rife in Retail Work." They talked about how sexual harassment is pervasive and persistent in retail work, with young women most at risk, as revealed in a new report by researchers from the Australian Centre for Gender Equality and Inclusion at Work, published by Australia's National Research Organisation for Women's Safety. Up to half of women and 1 in 4 men working in retail have experienced sexual harassment, including physical contact, sexually suggestive comments and jokes, intrusive questions about their private life or appearance, and like staring or leering or following around the store. I would say like that it would be even higher than like half of women, because I feel like every single girl that I've known who's worked in retail has experienced one of these things. Like, it is something that is so pervasive and common in the retail industry. The report found young women under the age of 25 are highly targeted and often subjected to multiple forms of sexual harassment. The CEO of Australia's National Research Organisation for Women's Safety, Tessa Boyd-Kane, said, "Sexual harassment in retail is common, normalised and harmful. This is part of the broader social environment that enables violence against women and children. And as such, sexual harassment needs to be understood clearly and taken seriously. There will be no one-size-fits-all solution to tackle this widespread problem. But as it stands, employers lack the necessary tools to action their responsibilities to keep their staff safe and free from sexual harassment. Enhanced reporting processes are imperative to ensure victim survivors feel safe and empowered to come forward." It's such a difficult issue to deal with because especially when you're like under the age of 18 and you experience some kind of sexual harassment, not only is it extremely likely that they don't really see it as sexual harassment, they don't understand what was really happening, they don't understand the motives of if it's someone higher up in management who they already see as an authority figure. Like, it's so difficult to say anything, but then it's also difficult to know who to tell. Like, if it's your manager who you would normally tell if something bad happened and they're the one who committed some like sexual act against you, who do you tell about that? Like, genuinely, I don't even know what you would do in that situation, especially if you didn't have access to talking to people who were like higher up, or you only knew other colleagues who were close friends with the manager or something like that. I think another issue that's like so rife in, oh my God, especially in Australian retail, for example, like Cotton On or any of the like subsidiaries of Cotton On, why do they own like so many different stores? Any retail store like that, I don't know, I can't think of any others, but they always have this like very specific workplace environment where they like act like everyone's a family. And so if anything goes wrong, you feel kind of bad, like saying something about a different coworker, or the whole environment is just so like toxic and so like bitchy female group. It's always like the ones where it's like always women as well. And you have the girls who are like higher up in management who just take advantage of everyone else. I mean, that's definitely another scenario, although I would say it's probably not as bad as when you have a creepy old male manager who sexually assaults you. Actually, in preparing for this episode, I put up a story asking for if anyone had any really bad experiences working in retail, because I wanted to hear specifically young women's stories about like the worst experience they've had with a man or a male customer at their job. So I'm going to read out the ones that got submitted for you. This one I had in a comment to one of my TikToks. They said, "I worked in multiple clothing stores over the years, had a man come in asking for help to young girl employees picking out a mini skirt for himself, then proceeded to put them on without underwear, parade in front of them to ask their opinion, just to shock them. Think he was a public fetishist. I banned him everywhere and also kicked him out every time I saw him. He did this all over town. Now I would call the police, but I was young myself and it was a more toxic environment." That is crazy. Like a man going around to multiple stores and doing this, like sometimes like these sort of stories are really funny in retrospect, but like at the time it's actually really scary. I actually like every time people ask me what my weirdest experience was with a man, I mean, it wasn't like really scary or anything, but I was closing the store by myself. And even though it was like literally closing time, there was still this guy in there. Let me describe to you what this guy looked like. Imagine like Jesus, right? Really long like brown hair, and he was wearing a full-length trench coat. But he was also, I think he was only like 25 or something. So just like a really confusing man. And he was looking around and I was like trying to close the store. Like it was like 5 p.m. and something. I was like, all right, chop chop, like I'm closing. He like goes outside as I'm closing the front door because we're closed. And then he was like, "Hey, I see you here all the time and like I think you're really pretty. Can I ask for your number?" I was like, oh, thank you. And then I closed the door on his face. I was like, first of all, like weird question to ask when I'm working, but also, can you not say I'm in the middle of closing the store? I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to give you my number when I'm closing. actually. Another response I got was, I was helping a female customer. I work at a gaming store. This man had not approached me or asked for help at all, and when I did ask if he needed anything, he told me no. While he was leaving, he called me a bitch and said I shouldn't be helping a woman over him and that I shouldn't even be working at a game store because I am a woman. You know what's really funny about that? I also work at a game store. And like, I relate to that. There hasn't been many times when people have been like, why do you work here if you're a woman? I think a lot of the time, like, we do get weird men in there. Like, that's kind of the main problem. You get like weird men who are obsessed with games and then they don't really like talking to women, or they don't know how to talk to women. And then most people who work in my store are women. And I'm like, well, sorry, I don't have a man here to help you, so it's just gonna be me. I feel like that's so common as well, especially like, I don't really have this experience, but I know so many people will be like working with a male colleague and customers will like always go straight to the man to ask for help because they don't think the woman is like qualified to know anything. Another response I got was, my parents are Vietnamese refugees who started a bakery business in New Zealand and I worked there growing up. When I was 12 to 13, I was working at the cash register serving an 80-ish aged white male and he was giving very seedy stares. Towards the end of the sale, I asked if there was anything else he would like and he asked me, "Are you for sale? How much are you?" and proceeded to laugh and say, "It's just a joke." And I was too shocked to respond and finish the sale and he left. This girl was 12 years old when that man said that to her. That's actually fucked up. And especially when you're taking race into account here. I've heard so many stories similar to this as well, of like men being weird to girls just because they're Asian, or like treating them like they're being like passport bros. I've heard so many like similar stories from my friends, and it's crazy because like the majority of my friends were born in Australia and people are trying to like passport bro them. It's like, you're not in Thailand. This is literally like an Australian girl you're talking to. Like, it's so weird. And especially when you're that age and you're working in retail. I mean, obviously this is like a family owned business, so probably a little less stressful to like feel like you might do something wrong and get fired. But I think that is such a common thing as well. Like, a male customer will be really weird too, but you're too scared to say anything back or like kick him out or not allow that behavior because you know you've been taught like the customer's always right, and you don't want to upset a customer because then you'll get told off by your management or something. So that definitely goes into it too. I have two responses from my sisters and they're so funny. Like, they're so bad, but they're actually really funny. So like, I'm allowed to laugh because it's my sister. This is when she worked at a cinema and I also worked at the cinema, but she said, "A man throwing an F-boss machine at my head because he was late to a movie." It's just so funny. I also worked there, but I only worked there for 6 months. I had different experiences for why I quit. I didn't get an F-boss machine thrown at me, but this job was so like, I was 15 when I worked there and I was really like socially inadequate and really socially anxious as well. And it was my first job and I was too scared to do anything. Like, I was too scared to talk to anyone. I was too scared to talk to my colleagues. Like, I just couldn't do anything. And I think when my sister first started working there, it was a bit more like relaxed. But when I was working there like 7 years later than she started, they'd kind of brought in like doing evaluations of the workers. And I think I got to my last evaluation and you needed like 90% to pass the last one. And I got like 80% or something. And I got taken into the office and they were like, "If you don't get above 90, then we're going to have to consider terminating your employment." And at that point, I was already crying before every shift. So I just quit. I was like, dude, this is a minimum wage job. I'm not trying that hard to get over 90% in my evaluation so I can keep the job. I'm quitting. Bye. Another response I had was, when I was 17, I worked in a hardware/corner shop. My customers were mainly old men. It was a regular occurrence that I would be the only one on shop floor or till, with my manager in the back stock room, and they would only come to the front when I needed to go on break. A lot of the men who came in were really sleazy and would often make comments regarding my age. I think the worst one was when I was selling cigarettes to a customer and I had my back turned as they were all behind the till. When I turned back, he kept asking about my age. I panicked as it was only my second job, so I said my real age, which was 17. He then turned to the man, stood in queue behind him and said, "Old enough," and smirked at me. I felt so uncomfortable and the other guy just laughed. These men were both over 60. So gross, and I ended up quitting that job due to the creepy customers. Like the fact that this girl had to quit her job because the customers were so fucking gross. Like, it shouldn't be the worker's responsibility to have to take themselves out of that environment because other people are making it difficult for them. Particularly when you talk about like having a creepy manager or something and then you're forced to quit your job and like having to find somewhere else to work when it's just not your fault at all. I had like one time I was in a shopping center with my friend and this guy who, I don't know how old he was, he looked probably like 25 plus. I think I was 18, maybe 19, I'm not sure. He stopped both of us and he was like, "Oh, like, you're so pretty. Can I have your number? Like, how old are you?" I said 17 initially, but then I was like, maybe he doesn't think that's young enough and he's still gonna like try and talk to me. So then I was like, "Wait, no, I changed my mind. I'm 16." And then he was like, "What the hell? Why did you change your answer?" And I was like, "Gotta go." And then we just walked away. This man literally looked like 30 or something. I was like, "Why are you even talking to me? Like, seriously, why are you talking to me?" Another response I had was not the worst, but balding middle-aged man told me that if he was a girl who looked like that, aka her, he would be making his money elsewhere. Hashtag OnlyFans. That's actually like so fucking weird because like the same men who would be like, "Oh, if I look like that, I would be making money on OnlyFans. If I was a woman, I would just sign up for OnlyFans and be rich," are the same kind of men who would look down on women for doing sex work or OnlyFans. Make up your mind, man. Also, just because you're a man doesn't mean you can't do OnlyFans. But why don't you do it? Because you don't think it's a respectful thing to do. Yeah, nothing's stopping you just because you're a man. You can have an OnlyFans. Um, Also, I think one of my a girl that I worked with had a customer tell her that he thought she would look good around a pole. I think she was 17 as well. Who the fuck says that to someone? Like, what? I had a really long submission here as well about a girl who worked at Coles. I'm gonna read the whole thing to you. I worked at Coles from age 14 and 9 months to 18. Loved the job in many ways, but working in service, you're bound to run into some crazies. For me personally, my regular customers were my absolute favorites. They all varied in ages and genders, but were mainly mums who would just vent after a long day with the kids. I did, although, have this one guy. He was my regular from the day I started. He was insanely nice, always waited in my line no matter how long of a wait it would be. We'd have a few good laughs, he'd talk about his daughters. Overall, he was one of my favorite parts about working. He just made me feel so comfortable, and I'd assumed to be around 60, so it was always coming across as fatherly to me. Come my 17th birthday, I told him a week prior I was taking the day off and when my next shift would be. Bear in mind, I worked at Coles with family members also, so I never ever felt unsafe at work. And I'd known him for years at this point, and it was never weird. So I turn up at my next shift, and he comes through and hands me a birthday note to read when I get home. A little gift from him. And he also left a box of chocolates with my manager, who had to sign them off so I was allowed to take them home. Come home time, I open the letter when I'm in the car with my mum. He was saying how I was now old enough for him to be able to tell me how beautiful I was and how attractive and robust of a woman I was growing into. Robust is crazy. Anyway, he goes on to say how attractive I was becoming and proceeded to ask me out on a coffee date. He wanted it to be private, and honestly, I was beyond disgusted, and so was my mum. I reported it to my supervisor, who was a male, and he said he would deal with it, and absolutely nothing was done until the next week when I followed it up during the next shift I had after I got the letter, thinking something would have been done about it during that time. And I immediately refused to work until he was at least banned from the store. There were 3 other Coles within a 5 to 10 minute drive, so honestly, he can go somewhere else. I was a child. After leaving mid-shift, it was escalated to HR and then police, and he was permanently barred from that Coles. And his photo was submitted to other Coles saying refusal of service was a thing you can do. So definitely felt very supported in the end, but yeah, definitely traumatizing at 17. Honestly, like, good on you for refusing to go to work until something was done about it, because like, especially at that age, and particularly if you didn't have like your mom telling you it was gross or something, like that would be so hard to like go to higher up and be like, actually actually tell HR about it and like try and get something done. And I think that's why so many people don't do anything about it, because it's actually like such a hassle for you to have to do that when realistically a 60-year-old man shouldn't be calling you beautiful anyway. Also, that sucks that like you actually liked this guy and you were like, oh my God, he's just like a nice old guy who has daughters and he was just, you know, being nice. Then he turns out to be like such a fucking freak. Like, I hate old male customers. Men over 40 should not be allowed in stores. What do you guys think of that? Should I try and get that into the law? Just after I finished recording this episode, I got another response to my survey, so I'm gonna read it for you now, just because this girl gave me like 5 different stories, so I was like, I need to include her. She said, I have a few answers across a few different jobs. 1, I was working at a retail fashion store. I had assisted a young girl in school uniform in finding clothes, and she went to try them on. 2 adult men followed her in when the girl watching the fitting room stepped away, and she came out hysterically crying because they were saying obscene things and scaring her. We were a female-only staff, but still attempted to kick the men out of the store. One of them started confronting me because when my store manager said there was a complaint, he thought it was me. We had to lock the young girls in the back office and hold our own until security showed up. That is honestly like probably the craziest one so far. Second one, working at a grocery/liquor store, a man came in and purchased liquor that he drank outside on premises. When I spoke with him to tell him that wasn't allowed, he smashed the bottles on the ground. He was later, I think she meant to write, arrested by police for harassment and stalking of a teenage girl that worked in the store next to mine, which is why he was drinking there. Had to warn all of the girls that worked there to call the police if they ever saw him again, terrifying them. Number 3, this isn't a customer but might be relevant to your podcast. When I was first made manager at my store, a male store assistant who had always been disrespectful towards us girls or his female colleagues began outright harassing me, including cornering me in an area of the store without cameras and poking me in my manager badge on my chest. This was among other things such as refusing to follow directions, not coming to shifts I was running, taking my things from my locker. When reported to my male store manager, he didn't care at all. Also, that's insane because you literally had a position of power over this guy and he still had the ability to do that to you. Like, that's another issue as well of like men in normal positions who just like don't respect their managers if they're female. She also continued on by saying, at this same job, a different male co-worker who was over 30 made up a love letter for one of the 20-year-old girls that worked there and left it in her locker anonymously. He had previously been kicked out of his old store for sexual harassment of multiple girls that worked there, but the company refused to fire him and kept moving him around to different locations. What the hell? So he was like still in the same company and they kept him even though he kept sexually harassing people. That is crazy. Number 4, when I was serving an old man on the registers, he started playing pornography on his phone and showed it to me. Enough said. She also said that she can't think of more specific ones, but there's definitely more because retail is hell. Oh my God. You actually have been through hell. Like they're like some of the worst ones and they're all from the same person. I feel so bad for her. We're gonna end. We're going to end with the submission by my elder sister. This one is so fucked up. Like, it's actually so disgusting. She said, I refused a refund of a $2 bouncy ball and he pulled out his penis and peed on the floor and continued to pee as he walked all the way to the exit. It's so bad. Like, ew. Also, over a $2 bouncy ball, like, bro, relax. I think this was the same job when she had someone pour a whole bottle of nail polish remover over her. Yeah, that seemed like a really safe working environment. It's actually fucked. I think all of this like goes into what I was talking about last week as well, how like when it comes to any kind of relationship where there's a power dynamic involved, it is so easy to abuse that. Like, it's so easy. And particularly when we're talking about young people and women, the law probably just doesn't do enough to protect them. And like a young person who's working a job, realistically, every person in management or everyone over 18 has some kind of duty of care to them at that job. Especially when I'm at work and like any one of my younger colleagues, like some customer starts being mean to them, like I will immediately butt in and get them to talk to me instead, because I'm like, why are you getting mad at someone who's minimum wage? But not just minimum wage, below minimum wage, because they're under the age of 20, I think is when it goes to full wage. Like, I just can't imagine ever seriously getting annoyed at someone for doing their job. And screaming and yelling and complaining is never going to get you what you want. But yeah, as I said, it's just so easy to take advantage of those power dynamics. Even as a customer, like realistically, you have some kind of power over the employee, because if they do something to upset you, then you get to complain. You get to complain and you can potentially make them lose their job. It's just like, I don't know. I feel like in customer service jobs, there's just such a like unfair power dynamic. And again, as I said, because everyone is a young employee, that gets taken advantage of so easy and so often. Anyway, that's all I had to talk about in this episode. Pretty short episode. Just kind of like a silly little topic I wanted to talk about because I thought about doing an episode on it, and I thought it'd be I thought it'd be interesting to go into. Next week, we're actually talking about post-feminism, which probably doesn't really make that much sense, but kind of talking about how people believe we're in a post-feminism society, which if you've listened to any of my episodes, you would be like, well, no. But anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and I will see you, or I will talk to you next week. Have a good week. Bye.